The story begins in a small coastal town where whispers of fortune always drifted like salt in the air. For generations, people had spoken about a hidden treasure buried deep within the cliffs beyond the harbor. The legend claimed it was left behind by sailors who never returned from a doomed voyage, their riches buried beneath earth and stone to keep it safe from both man and sea. The myth was passed down through families, exaggerated over time until it became less a tale of truth and more a story to frighten or inspire children. But for one man, a young fisherman named Elias, the story became an obsession. He had grown up poor, watching his mother struggle to put food on the table while the wealthy merchants of the town lived in luxury. The thought of a treasure waiting to be claimed was not just about gold, it was about freedom, dignity, and the chance to rise above the life he had been born into. One stormy evening, Elias stumbled upon something that changed everything. While mending nets in the old boathouse, he found a leather-bound book tucked away behind rotting planks. Its cover was worn, its pages stained by time and seawater, but inside was something extraordinary, a map. Drawn by hand, its lines traced the coastline of the very town he knew so well, but with strange markings that led inland toward the cliffs. The map seemed to confirm what had only been rumor: the treasure was real. Elias studied the markings by candlelight, tracing the symbols that pointed to caverns and landmarks long forgotten by most. He knew he could not tell anyone. Greed could twist even the kindest of men. Instead, he decided that he alone would follow the map, no matter the danger. The next morning, he prepared for the journey. He packed food, rope, and tools, disguising his purpose as an ordinary fishing trip. But his heart raced with every step, knowing he was chasing something that had eluded countless dreamers before him. The cliffs stood tall against the crashing waves, their jagged faces scarred by centuries of storms. Somewhere within them, the treasure waited, or so he believed. As Elias began to climb the narrow path up the cliffs, the wind howled, and loose stones slid beneath his feet. Every sound of the sea felt louder, every gust of air colder, as though the earth itself warned him to turn back. But he pressed on, gripping the map tightly, his determination stronger than his fear. At the top, he found the first marker from the map, an ancient oak tree, twisted and bent from the winds, its roots clawing at the rock. Beneath its shade, a narrow trail led deeper into the cliffs. Elias followed it, heart pounding, unaware that this journey would change not only his life, but also the fate of the legend itself. The sun dipped below the horizon as shadows stretched across the land. Elias lit a small lantern, its flicker guiding him forward. The treasure was closer than it had ever been for anyone before him. But in that moment, he did not know that the closer he came to the promise of gold, the further he stepped into the grip of a mystery that would never truly end. And so, with the map in one hand and a lantern in the other, Elias disappeared into the darkness of the cliffs, chasing the treasure that had tempted men for centuries. The lantern's glow cast trembling light against the stone walls as Elias moved deeper into the cliffs. The narrow passage seemed endless, carved by centuries of waves pounding against the rock. Water dripped from above, echoing like footsteps in the silence. Every sound was magnified: the scraping of his boots, the rustle of rope on his back, the steady thump of his heartbeat. The map's markings grew clearer now. Strange symbols etched into the rock matched those drawn on the paper, confirming he was on the right path. It was no coincidence. The sailors who buried their treasure had left signs for themselves, never expecting anyone centuries later would follow their trail. Elias felt both exhilaration and dread, as if invisible eyes were watching his every move. Deeper inside, the air grew damp and heavy. The walls widened into a cavern so vast his lantern barely touched its edges. Stalactites hung like teeth from above, and pools of dark water mirrored the faint glow of his light. In the center of the cavern, half buried in sand, lay something that froze Elias where he stood: the remains of men. Skulls, shattered bones, rusted weapons scattered like fragments of forgotten battles. He realized he was not the first to follow this path, and the others had never returned. Fear crept over him, but the thought of treasure, of freedom, pushed him forward. He picked his way carefully, avoiding the bones as though they might rise and grab him. The map showed a narrow split at the far end of the cavern, a passage barely wide enough for one man. Elias squeezed through, his lantern scraping the walls, until he emerged into another chamber. Here, the danger was not bones but traps. Wooden beams, rotted yet still intact, held back rocks poised to fall at the slightest disturbance. Rusty chains dangled from the ceiling, their purpose lost, but their menace clear. Elias understood now why so many had perished. The treasure was not just hidden, it was protected by cruelty and cunning. He moved slowly, breathing shallowly, testing each step before putting down his weight. Twice he triggered loose stones, sending them clattering down into the abyss of pits carved long ago. His lantern wavered, nearly extinguished by his own trembling hands, but he steadied himself. He would not turn back. At last, after what felt like hours, he reached the final marking on the map, a circle carved into the rock, surrounding a hollow in the floor. Elias knelt, brushing away dirt and sand, revealing a stone slab. His heart pounded as he dug his fingers into the cracks and heaved with all his strength. The slab shifted, and beneath it, a dark opening yawned like the mouth of the earth itself. He lowered the lantern and, for the first time, saw what had drawn so many before him. Glints of gold reflected in the flame. Coins, jewels, ornaments, piled together in a chamber below. The treasure was real. The legend was true. And yet, as he stared into the pit of wealth, something inside him shifted. This was no longer just about riches. It was about survival. Because in that instant, he heard the sound, the grinding of stone behind him. The passageway he had come through was closing. Whether by design of the sailors' traps or the natural shifting of the cliffs, Elias realized with horror that the treasure came at a cost. He was not just standing before gold. He was standing at the edge of a grave. The grinding of stone grew louder, like the growl of some ancient beast. Elias spun around, lantern trembling in his hand. The narrow crack he had entered through was sealing shut, rocks tumbling from above, dust choking the air. Panic surged through his chest. The treasure glittered below, taunting him with its promise of wealth, but the passage home was vanishing. He leapt forward, pulling at the slab, widening the opening and lowering himself into the treasure chamber. His boots landed in a shallow pile of gold coins that clinked like mocking laughter. Jewels shimmered in the lamplight, crowns and chalices scattered as if waiting for him. For a moment, awe overcame fear. He was surrounded by wealth beyond imagination, a fortune enough to buy kingdoms. But fortune in a tomb was no fortune at all. The air was heavier here, stale and suffocating as though sealed for centuries. The lantern's flame wavered, threatening to die, and Elias felt the walls closing in. He searched desperately for another way out, brushing aside coins, pushing against the stone walls, but there was nothing, no tunnel, no crack, only the chamber and its cursed wealth. Then he noticed something. A skeleton slumped against the far wall, a rusted sword in its hand, its skull tilted upward as if staring toward the ceiling. Above it, faint carvings etched into the stone. Elias raised the lantern higher, revealing a set of directions, or perhaps a warning. It pointed not to the walls, but upward, toward a narrow shaft. His pulse quickened. It was a way out, but it climbed straight through the rock, steep and jagged, barely wide enough for a man. Dropping the lantern, Elias grabbed at the shaft's edges, the rocks tearing into his hands. Gold clattered from his pockets as he climbed, each movement a struggle against the crushing weight of exhaustion. Below him, the treasure lay untouched, gleaming in the dying light, as if trying to drag him back. His muscles burned, his breath tore from his lungs, but he kept climbing. He would not die in the dark. At last, after endless minutes, his hands grasped open air. He hauled himself out of the shaft and collapsed onto the ground above. The night sky stretched endlessly, stars glittering far brighter than the treasure below. The ocean roared nearby, the cliffs steady beneath him. He had escaped. Elias lay there, staring at the heavens, his body trembling with both exhaustion and relief. He had seen the treasure that had taken countless lives. He had touched it, felt its weight, and yet he left it behind. Perhaps that was the real curse, not that the treasure could not be found, but that it could never be taken. Legends would continue. Sailors would whisper about the gold hidden in the cliffs, and treasure hunters would follow, just as Elias had. But the truth was clear. The treasure was not meant for the living. It was meant to remain buried, guarded by stone, claimed only by the dead. And so, Elias returned to his village, empty-handed but alive. Some called him a failure, others a coward, but he knew better. He had looked into the heart of greed, into the cavern where men vanished and walked away. The treasure was real, but it was never found because it was never meant to be.